Greetings and namaste, my fellow light travelers. Welcome to How to Rock Astrology. My name is Dustin Cormier, and this is the start of my series on the Nakshatra aphorisms. This is a rather underappreciated and necessary part of astrology, at least underappreciated in the Western tradition. Today we're going to be talking about what the Nakshatras are in a general sense, and later in the series we're going to get a few opinions from a few different sources on what exactly is going on here. Now, Western astrologers, this is entirely new for you. Vedic astrologers, you will be noticing that I have a certain way of describing the nakshatras, including their measurements in the signs and the rashis, and I'll be explaining why as I go along. So thanks for coming. Now, what are the nakshatras? As I said, as we go along in the series, we're going to get into some more astronomical guts of what they are. I want to paint a big picture in the Dustin Cormier way to start the series before I get into the authoritative texts of other authors. And we shall begin. I've got a few pictures in here to kind of lighten up the image and metaphor of what it's about. The 27 nakshatras are a map of the soul which overlays the zodiac horoscope. That's the 12 divisional signs of the zodiac, which we all know. And every good astrologer must learn to integrate the 12 sign zodiac with nakshatra astrology. And they're quite different. We can see that the 27 sign astrology works on the numerology of the power of 3. 3 times 3 times 3, right? 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. Whereas the zodiac is more of a 3 times 4 situation. Now, different traditions of astrology have divided the portions of the sky in different ways in the past. Sometimes it's just a matter of, there's usually if there's a different numerical division or portioning of the signs, then it means that you're dealing with an entirely different a different psychological sphere. So the nakshatras are an entirely different thing to our souls, to our energy field, than the 12 sign zodiac divisions are. Now, different traditions divide the sky in different ways. Sometimes it's a matter of being different, just presenting different shells of our energy field. In this case, there's the 12 sign zodiac. There's even an 18 sign zodiac that the Egyptians followed, which I haven't gotten into, and I'm interested in what that's all about. I would imagine it works on the numerology of 3 times 6. And then there's the nakshatras, which work on a 27 division. Now, I want to make a point that this is different from what we know of the sidereal tropical debate, right? Sometimes the portioning of the sky is different because of mistranslation. But with the sidereal tropical debate, which many of you probably know about, we're still dealing with different interpretations or translations of the 12 sign zodiac energy field, the metaphysical shell or sheath of the 12 sign constellations. So, for example, I'm going to give the short thrift because there's many videos on the sidereal tropical debate. But Some traditions, like the sidereal Vedic astrologers, hold that the 12-sign zodiac is fixed to the stars. Sidereal means fixed. While some other astrological traditions, such as the Western and tropical traditions, maintain that the 12-sign zodiac is actually created by the passage of the sun through the tropics of the local sky, from Earth's perspective. And this changes as the Earth's axis shifts through the precession of the equinox. And that's tropical Vedic astrology. So, this is two different traditions disagreeing on how to interpret the same 12-sign energy shell. It's the 12 rashi, the 12 signs that we all know: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, etc. These two traditions have different perspectives or different ways of measuring the same shell, the same metaphysical shell. And that's the zodiac we all know, which breaks into 12 divisions of 30 degrees each. Essentially, the Western tropical tradition suggests that the sun comes into Aries during the vernal equinox, whereas the sidereal tradition holds that the sun is in Aries when it's in a certain portion of the sky. That's why the sidereal Vedic astrologers appear to be 24 degrees behind the tropical Western Vedic astrologers. Now, that's the classic thing. This is something completely different. The Nakshatras being divided into 27 constellations makes it a completely different horoscopes. And it represents, you can literally do a reading for a person looking at the planets in the sky and noting where they are in the 27 divisions of the sky. And it'll be a completely different reading from what you might read from the same astrologer. I'm an astrologer who does this. You can come to me and you can ask me about your nakshatra natal horoscope. And I could close my left eye and just give you the complete nakshatra interpretation. And then I could close my right eye and give you the classical 12-sign astrology. And I would be talking essentially about two dimensions of the same person. They have to be integrated. And this is part what I'm trying to say here. We must understand that the nakshatras, the 27 nakshatras, they intrinsically overlay the 12 zodiac signs we know from the tropical or sidereal 12-sign zodiac. So, eventually, the 12 nakshatras become overlaid upon the 12 zodiac signs. Can you guys see me good? And now this is a graphic borrowed from Vic Takara, who is also a tropical Vedic astrologer. So, this is the 20, as we can see, if you count these: Jesta, Mula, Purvashada, Uttarashada, Shravana, Dhanishta, Satapishak, Purva Bhadrapada, Uttara Bhadrapada. You go all the way around, it adds up to 27. But we can also see the 12 zodiac signs interlaid within them. Aries, according to this chart, Aries starts in Uttara Bhadrapada, and it goes all the way and ends in Ashwini. And then Taurus starts halfway through Ashwini and ends just kind of at the end of Kritika. Then Gemini starts at the end of Kritika and really ends, I believe, at either the start of Mrigashirsha or the end of Ardra. I believe it's the end of Ardra. I mixed those up. Gemini ends at the beginning of Ardra, and Cancer begins at the starting of Ardra. Words. Anyway. Now we can see that the two are interlinked. So what exactly does it mean that these two are intrinsically integrated or overlaid? I want to consider it as being like overlaying two maps together. Okay? Now consider it like this. Have you ever noticed that the geographical or ecological map of a place always looks different from a political or territorial one? And here's an example. This is a map of what we in North America call the prairies, this little green spot here. Now the prairies, I mean, they're even technically kind of bigger than this, but this is just, for the sake of the example, I got these images here. We can see that the prairies are a geographical, ecological zone, which is its own thing. Our human national border, the national boundary between Canada and the United States, is kind of made up. The real land is the ecology. And, for example, we can see these are the characteristics of this particular little zone in North America. For those watching, Canada and the United States of America are both considered parts of North America, whereas, Mexico and then South America is down here. So both of these are considered North America, and the prairies are a beloved part, a shared part between the two countries. Just to give it short thrift, it's got these flat grasslands, a few trees, including aster, willows, aspen. Pronounced a subhumid to semi-arid climate, and it's field roaming animals like bison, deer, and wild horses are all over the prairies. We can see here it's the same thing. Those are the prairies, and it's split between the two countries, right? So this red zone here is the prairie zone. This is where this ecological zone exists. We see the man-made borders in this picture separating the countries, provinces, and even the federal border of Canada and the USA. So we can see this is like Saskatoon in Canada. This arrow is pointing at Manitoba. It's another province. In Canada, we call the states provinces. So it's just like the state of Manitoba, you could say. And then in North Dakota, in the USA, we're pointing at North Dakota here. And this is this little point where basically I'm trying to make this metaphor. Obviously, even though they're separated by nation, they're right next door to each other. So if you walk outside in Brandon, Manitoba, this is the bottom of Manitoba, close to the United States border. And then, so if you walk outside in Brandon, Manitoba, on the southern border of Canada, and you notice the surrounding ecology, you'll find it's no different than somebody walking outside of what I've written as Kenmore, North Dakota, on the northern border of the United States, right? So this is the northern border of the United States. This is the southern border of Canada. You can see what's going on here. They're basically neighbors, but they have the same ecology. They're in the same ecosystem, which is the prairies, the same ecological area. Same animals, same foliage, same land, but the laws are different. Now, you're going to see the takeaway here. This is the important takeaway. Since the laws of the land are different, they each use the land differently. Right? Now, the nakshatras, symbolically, we could call like the prairies. Whereas the zodiac signs are kind of like the border between Canada and America, right? The prairies are what they are, but the two countries deal with the prairies, and they have a different culture, a different attitude towards what they do with the trees, with the plants, with the ecosystem that they're surrounded by. If the 27 nakshatras represent the ecological borders, like the land, then the 12 zodiac signs represent the national, provincial, human, man-made borders, the imaginary borders. And, what I'm trying to really show is that they're really, the tropical rashis are as different from the territory of the tropical, and what I'm trying to say is that the signs, the rashis, I should be careful with the word tropical because there's likely sidereal people watching here too. The rashis, the signs, are completely different from the nakshatras. In the same way that the signs, the rashis, like Aries, Taurus, Gemini, etc., these are like national boundaries, whereas the zone, the prairie zone, the bones of the land itself, which has nothing to do with boundaries, no human man-made imaginary boundaries, that's like the nakshatras. And they represent two completely different maps, although the maps are both transmitting important information about the territory, right? If you look up the map of Manitoba, you would have to see the ecological map that would show the prairies, but we would also have to understand that it's in Canada, not the United States, and therefore, even though the land is the same, how it's dealt with is different. It's a completely different land. So what you're basically seeing is two different dimensions of the same thing. One is like an X-ray vision of like you're seeing the bones of this hand. One is infrared vision. It's the muscle tissue. It's two different layers of the same thing, namely the person whose name is on the horoscope. Now, this is why they must be overlaid. Understand that, let me just check that you guys can see here. Yep. X-rays show bones, whereas infrared shows muscles. A good doctor will not ignore the bones, the bone structure of a patient, in order to try and fix a torn ligament. And in the same way, a good astrologer cannot accurately predict or diagnose how a planet in a certain zodiac sign will behave without also overlaying or integrating that reading of any planet in any sign. Mars in Leo is the example we're going to be using. A good astrologer cannot predict what Mars in Leo is going to be like without relaying or integrating that reading with the bones revealed through that planet's placement in the 27 nakshatras. So that's what this overlay is all about that I'm talking about here. Any planet in Leo, whether it's the beginning of Leo in the nakshatra Pushya, the middle of Leo in the nakshatra of Ashlesha, or the end of Leo in the nakshatra of Magha, all of these represent different bone structures, which we must use in different ways in order to heal a person. You can't just assume that because a person has Mars in Leo that it is going to act, that every Mars in Leo is going to act the same way. Now, here we are showing that this Mars in the nakshatra of Magha, this is this little part right here, it at the same time, this is the integration of the two wheels, right? Mars being in the nakshatra of Magha, and also being at 27 degrees of Leo. When you put them together, it looks like this. Mars, 27 degrees of Leo. It's kind of like the muscles, whereas the nakshatra is the bones. And really, I've been really trying to put out this metaphor that the muscles sit on the bones in the same way that the national imaginary human borders sit on the land. The nakshatras are, in a way, really more primary than the energy field that we see through the rashis and the signs. Rather, maybe not more primary. It's a hard thing to say, because what are the bones without the muscles, and what are the muscles without the bones? But they are, in any case, they are the earth, the spiritual earth upon which the energy field of the rashis and signs sits. Now, suppose we have a planet at 27 degrees of the rashi of Leo. And this is what we're talking about here. According to Victakara, now keep in mind, again, this is just Victakara, because even amongst this is a tropical Vedic astrology diagram. Sidereal astrologers would put Magha right in the middle of Leo, or closer to the beginning. This is a tropical chart, and even amongst tropical Vedic astrologers, where exactly the nakshatras sit in the zodiac is still up for much debate. Victakara, who's a tropical Vedic astrologer, in his book, which I have here, and I'm just going to show real quick, in Victakara's book, Nakshatra, The Authentic Heart of Vedic Astrology, he gives a very useful little breakdown of where all the planets are. I want to just take a little peeksy look at that for anybody's reference who's interested. So Victakara has his own schema for how the tropical signs line up exactly with the nakshatras, because according to the tenets of tropical-based Vedic astrology, the signs are progressing through the equinox. So, right now, for example, again, Magha is the ending of Leo and the beginning of Virgo. 2,000 years ahead, that Magha is going to be probably in the middle of Virgo or close to the end of Virgo, because they're moving. But I digress. Let's stick to our current conversation. According to Victakara, a planet which falls at 27 degrees of Leo necessarily falls into the constellation, the nakshatra of what's called Magha. Magha is the royal throne room of the Pitris, who are the ruling deities of this asterism, our ancestral forefathers. So if anybody has any planets here in this particular part of the zodiac, you are also going to be perpetuating unconsciously the themes related to Magha, this throne of power. 2,000 years ago, when people thought, when the sidereal astrologers assumed that the nakshatras and the rashis were married and necessarily fixed to each other, which is not, according to tropical astrology, it's not the case. But 2,000 years ago, people assumed that part of the reason why Leo had so much power and authority was because Magha was inside of Leo, and it's the heart of Leo. Of course, we know that that doesn't make sense today, because the nakshatras are progressing over time through the rashis and signs. So this is what Magha is all about. Any planet in Magha is impelled to carry on ancestral, family, and corporate efforts and authority. It's our ancestral energy. You're gonna, as we go along, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about Magha. Now, in order, for our purposes, we're going to hypothetically imagine, because this is the picture I'm trying to build here, is to show that Magha is on the border of Leo and Virgo, in the same way, essentially, that the prairies, which is like Magha, the nakshatra, the area, the ecozone, is on the imaginary border between Canada and the United States of America. In the same way, Magha, the constellation, is in between Leo and Virgo. Now, a planet at 27 degrees of Leo deals with the nakshatra of Magha, i.e., like the prairies. A planet at 27 degrees of Leo deals with the nakshatra themes of Magha, the throne of power, much differently than a planet at, let's say, 1 degree of Virgo, because we know, of course, that Magha, 1 degree of Virgo is in the nakshatra of Magha, clearly, right? I keep I have to look every once in a while to see that my screen is on the right, so that I can see that I'm screen sharing with you guys. Virgo, the very start of Virgo is in the nakshatra of Magha. So as we know, Leo and Virgo are two completely different signs, ruled by completely different planets, the Sun and Virgo, respectively. Now let's imagine the planet at 27 degrees of Leo is like someone living on the northern border of the United States in North Dakota, right? Now they're in the prairies, that's the land. This is the northern border. The States is down here, so we're at the northern border of North Dakota here. Down there in the States, and this is the land here, and in the States, they're less conservative about their gun and hunting policies. So as long as you follow the seasonal guidelines and avoid hunting out of season, it's much easier to get a gun in the States than it is in Canada. And you can pretty easily buy a hunting rifle and go and shoot a wild deer or whatever for food, as long as it's not close to extinction. I have to let you guys know that I'm not a hunter. I'm really not. So I'm using this as a metaphor. The specifics of these laws might be a little bit askew, but I'm trying to paint a metaphor here. Down in the States, in Leo, we can imagine there's a little bit more. It's trying to represent Leo as the States. Again, it's just metaphorical. They're much more rock and roll about this whole hunting thing. Up here in Canada, that's where I live, we have stricter gun policies. So let's imagine the same planet positioned instead at 1 degree of Virgo, which, according to Victakara, is still considered to reside in Magha, as we've seen, right? 1 degree of, this is Cancer, Leo, Virgo. Just at 1 degree of Virgo is still in the sign of Magha. So this is our royal throne room. The planet is still at 1 degree of Virgo. We're imagining that we're passing the Canadian border from the United States. We're passing into Canada. I'm sure that, nice guy Canada is kind of a little bit more conservative and strict about the gun policy. We don't just make guns. We don't make guns as nearly as available here in Canada as we do in the States. Again, this is a metaphor. That's why I think that, Canada doesn't necessarily have Virgoan tendencies. I haven't looked up the national charts. But there is a funny joke here with the sense that America's more Leo, and then Canada's the more conservative, nervy Virgo. But I digress. Now, someone on the border of Manitoba, it's this little portion here, this province. Someone on the border of Manitoba or Saskatchewan could easily go out and find some wild prairie deer, because that's like the land that we're talking about here. Here in Canada and Manitoba, we're still close enough to this prairie land. So the prairie deer are there, but we have a more conservative policy towards how we deal with our local ecology. We will deal differently with that same land. So essentially, somebody born in conservative Canada, stop the bloody seal slaughter and all these things, a person born in Canada, i.e. Virgo, will deal with the ecology of the prairies differently than someone who's born in the United States, even though it's the same land. Similarly, a planet, a Leo planet, in the Nakshatra of Magha, it'll express itself in more dominating ways, a little bit more slapdash, commanding and aggressive, will take on authoritative roles requiring power, honor, and sacrifice in order to express that planet's potentials. Now, this all has to do with Leo, right? A planet in 27 degrees of Leo is going to be expressing Magha, the throne of power, and it's going to be doing it through Leo-like tendencies, which honestly, for the most part, is probably more consistent with Leo anyway. Depending on the planet, they tend not to do as well in Virgo because Magha's themes and agenda relate more to Leo than to Virgo. But that doesn't mean that every planet that lands in Magha is going to do better in Leo than it's going to do in Virgo, as we shall see. Because tropical astrology and nakshatra astrology are integrated, meaning that, of course, we know that there are planets which work better in Virgo than they do in Leo. Like Saturn, for example. We're going to get there. Now, this planet in 27 degrees of Leo carries on ancestral, family, and corporate efforts and authority through the traits of Leo. Whereas a planet at 1 degree of Virgo, it might be more reserved, more careful, more meticulous, more calculated in doing those things that relate to Magha. It's delegating, like Magha's really all about finding out the family lineage or a corporate lineage, any group that Magha attaches it to, especially through the nature of the planet and the house lordship of the planet. If this is the 11th lord, then the throne of power might relate to something like an idea or a cultural group. Whereas if this is the 6th lord, then the throne of power could mean something as simple as the person who delegates pens at your office job or the person who delegates your staff manager is your throne of power for the 6th lord, if the 6th lord is in Magha here. And that 6th lord in Magha might even do better in Virgo or Leo. It really depends more on the planet. But this is just giving you more food for thought. Now, finally, I can get rid of these stupid pictures. Pretty sure that should be all of them. We can see what we mean when we say that a nakshatra reading must be integrated and overlaid upon the 12-sign zodiac horoscope, because it's useless for a Leo to express Magha the way a Virgo should. Just as a planet in Virgo, should not express the potentials of Magha the way we would expect a Leo to, a planet in Leo. It's the problem with the sidereal Vedic astrologers. I guess I'd like to keep this, maybe I should keep the bias out of this, but I guess this is the place I'm going to here. The problem with the sidereal system, in my opinion, as a tropical Vedic astrologer, is that the siderealists assume that any planet in Magha ought to express itself through the Leo characteristics, because they assume Leo and Magha are married. In this new burgeoning system of tropical Vedic astrology, we would contend that a planet in Virgo, in the sign of Magha, ought to express the bones, the intentions, the agenda of Magha through that planet in the way of the rashi, the sign that that planet resides in. Now, of course, the real fun begins when we add the third tier. Are you lost yet? Don't worry, folks. The sooner you get on top of this thing, the better. And there is a top. There is a logic to it all. And I'm excited to be a part of the unfolding of it. The real fun begins when we consider the nature of the planet in question. Now, let's imagine, as you might have guessed from the hunting example, I already showed you anyway, but what I had in mind with this hunting example was that we were using the planet Mars. Okay? It's not now. It's not hard to imagine why Mars at 27 degrees of Leo would be more powerful than it would be if Mars were at 1 degree of Virgo. Now, why is that? If you're a Vedic astrologer, you'll be on the same train of thought with me. Because essentially, when Mars is in the sign of Leo, it's in the sign that is ruled by the sun. And the sun is a friend to Mars. They're both noble, they're both fire planets. They want to just jump at things. And so the agenda of Mars is well served to be in the field of Leo. Whereas Mercury, which rules Virgo, is Mars's enemy. We know that when Mars is in the sign of Virgo, it overanalyzes, and the warrior agenda, the instinctive power agenda of Mars, is obstructed and wasted by too much overthinking, overanalysis, and this hot energy is pissed away in efforts that are like much effort expended with little results. Because that's not what Mars is for. Mercury would do better in Virgo and Magha, but not Mars, because as we know, Mercury, which rules Virgo, is an enemy of Mars. So therefore, the agenda of Mars and Magha would be obstructed if it was in the sign of Virgo. Now, Mars is Mr. Run and rock and roll athlete. Let's just, shoot freely and enjoy the sport of killing. That's kind of what Mars is about. And therefore, Mars is going to do better in Leo. Which, remember, my metaphor here expresses that the United States is more of this Leo vibe when it comes to hunting. At least, again, metaphorically. There are less regulations in America for guns, less restrictions. It's kind of more about, let's do the thing. Let's go out and, express ourselves to the fullest and get on top of the food chain, because that's what humans do, and this is the real Mars and Sun energy. So Mars is going to be ennobled. It's worth the ennoblement of the spirit to authoritatively get on top of those less powerful in spirit and in intention. That's kind of the visceral nature of Mars in a lot of ways, and it can be put to good constructive use if it's aimed at something like this. The sport of killing is a bit extreme in my opinion. You could probably find more ahimsa ways, more non-harming ways of expressing it. But this is Mars being put to its best thing. Mars gets much more done for Magha's ancestral company asset management and delegation and networking that Magha does. Mars does that much better when it's in Leo than it does in Virgo. Because in Virgo, Mars overthinks and wastes time in a million little useless efforts. If Mars wanted to express this if Mars was delegating for some kind of group, if Mars was the seat of power in some kind of group, and someone came to them, at some level, people want to just lean on the instinctive rulership of Mars's logical mind. And if Mars is in Virgo and they are leaning on their advisors too much, they, every time someone comes up to the Mars in Magha in Virgo person, and the Mars in Magha in Virgo person says, okay, this is an important decision for a lot of people are depending on me, my whole family, my whole business is depending on me. I've really got to make sure that I've checked all my T's and dotted all my I's. And I've checked it all and I've asked all my advisors, and by the time it's all come through, I can finally make this decision. And it's like, okay, great, boss. Now you've got 10,000 other decisions that you've got to make, which are now rotting because it took you so long to make that first decision. And now the opportunities, the networking is wasted because Mars thought about it too long. Of course, whether Mars itself, another question is, does Mars do well in Magha? This is a worthy question as well. Victakara, who is a real, in my opinion, a real deep authority on this stuff, and that's why I keep mentioning his name throughout all this. Victakara suggests that Mars does do well in the nakshatra of Magha, because being a strong leader of a group or a company's assets, i.e. the royal throne, it requires vigilance, it requires strength of will and single-pointed concentration. So Mars does good in Magha, right? Thus, this is something that's, this is the kind of patchwork that can either bum out a positive reading or help to give a little bit of extra faith to a bad reading in the 12-sign zodiacal astrology. For example, thus Mars at the first degrees of, from 0 to 7 degrees of Virgo, it does okay because the agenda of the nakshatra Magha, power, authority, etc., it matches the agenda of Mars. You always want the planet to match the agenda of the field that it's in. And now we're seeing that there's the agency, the planet, there's the bones, the land upon which it surveys itself. That's the nakshatra. And then there's the energy that it puts itself through, which is the tropical, the rashis and signs. So, Mars does do good in the first 7 degrees of Virgo, approximately, because Mars does well with the agenda of Magha. It's just too bad for the energy wasted through overanalysis by being in Virgo. The Mars is doing okay there by nakshatra, but its rashi, its sign of Virgo, is going to obstruct that essentially well-aligned nakshatra placement, right? So, now we are getting into this integrating of the two systems. Let's take on another planet. Another planet, on the other hand, may have it switched. Let's consider the nature of Saturn in this situation. Victakara notes, again, I'm getting all of these particular descriptions of Mars and Saturn in the nakshatra of Magha from Nakshatra, the Authentic Heart of Vedic Astrology, by our plucky friend Victakara. In each chapter, in each nakshatra, he gives a decent little description of what planets work well and what planets don't in each nakshatra. Victakara notes that Saturn doesn't do so well in the nakshatra of Magha. Oftentimes, the planets that do well, the planets that do well in a nakshatra, when Jupiter, Mars, and the sun, and often also the moon, when these four planets do well in a nakshatra, it's likely that Mars, Mercury, and Venus aren't going to do so well because it's the yin and the yang. Usually there's kind of a yang and there's a yin. Yang planets do better in yang signs, yin planets do better in yin signs, kind of similar to tropical astrology, that is the 12 sign rashi signs astrology. But the logic behind it is not as cut and dry as our classic 12 sign astrology. Victor notes very succinctly that this is a Vedic consciousness by which you really have to learn and study the nakshatras, see the meaning and themes related to them, which are thick and dense, and it's just not the same geomancy. It's not the same alchemical, numerological relationships as Rashi-based astrology. Gosh, I'm so bad with habits. Rashi-based astrology. So it is a different thing, but there is a logic, and Victakara has got a sense of it, although we are really, in this day and age, the shifting of the equinoxes is quite a new phenomenon. Guys like Victakara he's one of the only people talking about this. And so it's important for those of us in this new age, this new conception of the nakshatras, to understand that we're all helping each other unveil through dialectical reasoning between each other, as well as our intuitions, as well as through scripture, what is really the good and bad placements of the planets in the nakshatras. So, Victakara tells us that Saturn does not do well in the nakshatra of Magha because it's anti-authoritarian, just like Rahu and Ketu are. I understand what he means there. It's thick to describe, and when we get to Magha, it'll be more deep, more unveiled there. Saturn in Magha, Vic says, indicates pronounced clashes with conservative and hierarchical powers. So Saturn is in a tough place here. We can imagine symbolically in our hunting metaphor. So I'm going to try to unveil this again through the United States being like Leo, and then Canada being conservative, nice guy, meticulous, calculated Virgo. Let's imagine symbolically that Saturn is like a radical ecologist who is deeply sensitive to, essentially, Saturn in Magha. I'm likening it in this metaphor to be someone from who works for PETA. It's the Save the Animals campaign, who is trying to conserve the global ecology of the planet. Right? Consider that Magha relates with, again, ancestral energy, things that have been left behind from those before us. And the planet, is one of those things. The ecology is one of those things. Unfortunately, our ecology is dwindling more and more all the time. Partly because we as humans just like to use those resources. So it's ironic that Saturn in Magha it's annoying because we are supposed to use our resources and hopefully make them so that the one resource we use gives us two resources back. It's the nature of human intelligence when it's applied correctly. I digress. If Saturn... Now let's imagine that the Saturn is in Magha. It's a little bit of a ecological... a radical ecologist. Now, let's imagine that this radical ecologist is a little bit of an animal saver person. And they hypothetically lived in the United States, i.e. the sign of Leo. And they want to petition for stricter gun control, stricter hunting rules. Now, it might meet some frustration from the national command of the USA, since the states prefer to have a fiery approach to their guns and hunting. Essentially, Saturn may face its struggles of trying to conserve the global ecology in this way. It may face these struggles more severely in the sign of Leo, and this because the sun, which rules Leo, is an enemy to Saturn, right? Conservative Saturn would be tarred and feathered at a libertine American gun convention, even though Saturn in Magha is only trying to fortify the ancestral energy and assets and resources of the land and the surrounding ecosphere. So, what I'm trying to build here is that Saturn in Magha, it's already having a hard time doing this. Like, it's conservative about letting ancestral energy flow to its proper places. Saturn has some nakshatras that it does well in, but for this particular thing, Magha is about the open flowing of our ancestral energies so that other peoples, other lands, other energies, other things in our lives can get that energy and can be used constructively to further build our empire. That's why it just happens. This what it is. Planets like Mars, the Sun, and Jupiter do well in Magha because you got a little bit more fling when you are looking positively forward to using your resources. That's what your money is for. It's ironic that those who let money flow out of them is always flowing out of them. Those who try to hold money never have money to hold. This is particularly true of this ancestral energy related to the Pitris and Magha. So, all in all, Saturn in Magha is having a hard time, and it's having an even worse time in the sign of Leo. This is the two things happening. This is a double negative emphasis, which means that, again, this can skunk you double with this having an extra reading of the nakshatras. Because while Saturn is already having a hard time at 27 degrees of Leo, because the sun is an enemy to Saturn, the sun's authority comes from power, whereas Saturn's authority comes from slow, meticulous failings and strivings and failings and understanding the field and the world around it. And Saturn in Leo burns itself out, essentially. Puts in much effort and doesn't get much back because it's doing it in the wrong way. Now, let's suppose Saturn was at 1 degree of Virgo instead, in Magha. The ruler of Virgo is Mercury, which is considered to be a friend to Saturn in Vedic astrology, as we all know. It's very unlike the Sun, specifically for Saturn. I mean, the Sun and Mercury are actually very close together, and they can be similar in their ways. But, conservative Saturn works very well in the sign of conservative, by-the-books, meticulous Virgo. When you think about it, Mercury rules an earth sign, Virgo, and Saturn rules an earth sign, Capricorn, right? They're best friends. So, while our radical ecologist, Saturn, the antsy person who's just trying to conserve and use the energy around it in the right way, it's almost like Saturn wants to use or invest long-term energy into something that will replenish the reserves of the resources and assets and ancestral energies that it uses. In Leo, it does this in wasteful ways. But it's less wasteful in Virgo. While our radical ecologist Saturn, it's still in hot water by being in the vicinity of Magha, in the prairies, right? When it moves up here to Canada, may find it has a much easier time maneuvering, Canada meaning Virgo, metaphorically. This radical ecologist is going to have an easier time maneuvering the political and ecological organizations and atmosphere which oversee the climate of the biosphere in Canada. I mean, Canada is actually less... There's a lot more pollution running in our rivers than the media probably makes it out to be. We're pretty bad as well. We like to paint the image that we are more ecologically minded than we really perpetuate, which is, yeah, whatever. Anyway, this isn't a local video. This is an astrological one. So even though, Saturn in Virgo still runs into trouble because it clashes with the local authority and communal resource registry in Magha, which nobody really wants to deal with. Even those in Canada having to face this person who is rigidly trying to make sure that all of our grasses and our ecosphere is still staying alive. It's like a heavy energy. Okay, man, I get it. But at least in Virgo, the struggle will be reduced because Saturn will prove its point not by egoic brute force like in Leo, where it's weak and it can't sustain itself in Leo. It has these ego bursts and then it destroys itself and everything that it's worked for. It puts a lot of energy and hope into some hopeful gamble and then tries to manipulate things with that, and it becomes like political fiascos. Saturn in Magha, in the sign of Virgo, will hold back on that. Hold its horses. It'll be slow. It'll apply slow, meticulous, and consistent effort to its earnest intentions. And this Saturn being in Virgo will deeply fix and alleviate the problems associated with Saturn being in the Nakshatra of Magha. Right? In other words, the agenda of Saturn does not match so well with the agenda and intentions of the Nakshatra of Magha. But at least in Virgo, it will be resourceful, it will be functional, and it'll be useful somewhere along the line. And Saturn in Virgo will retain resources for the person's energy field to use. Because, the Virgo and the Leo thing is really about your energy field. Magha is the area in which you are generating the energy field that we know of through the sign of Virgo, if that makes sense, right? So we can see the three-tiered symbology being simultaneously integrated here. It's like three different maps, all revealing separate information about the same region, the same object, same entity. And it's important to know that none of these maps are true in isolation, without the context of the others. It's like a color by numbers picture. When you color all the... If you've ever seen one of those pictures, this is the one picture I should have gotten for the ending. But you might have seen them when you were young. It was like a black and white sketch. And there were little numbers, 1, 2, 3, and 4, all throughout. Now, as a kid, what you would do is you would take your crayon and you'd paint all the ones the same color. You'd paint them all yellow. And you'd see a little bit of what the picture's supposed to look like. Then, when you color in all the number 2s purple, and all of a sudden you see more of the picture. Another layer of the reality is being shown. And at this point, you can almost even predict what the picture is. But you cannot know all the details until you lay out all the maps at once on top of each other. Only then will you appreciate the thing in its fullness. In the same way, any astrologer would be foolish to give a prediction without knowing the agenda of the Lagna, the agenda of the planet, the agenda of the rashi, the sign, and the agenda of the nakshatra placement of the planet, all together. When I said the lagna there, I meant like the house. When you have a planet in a position, you need to know, not only do you need to know the aspects to that planet, but you need to know what house lord is that planet. It's the 6th and the 9th lord, whatever. It's carrying, let's say it's Saturn in the lagna of, like a Leo rising. So Saturn rules the 6th and 7th house. We would need to know that it's the 6th and 7th lord, that it's Saturn, that it's in the sign of Leo, and it's in the nakshatra of Magha. Now, the funny little picture I wanted to have here is that if an astrologer gives a prediction without... so if somebody gives a prediction without the whole picture, it'd be like an astrologer telling a man in northern Manitoba, which is outside the prairies, right? Way outside like it was southern Manitoba that has the prairies, right? Northern Manitoba is like the Rockies. That's like central Canada. Whole different ecosphere. Now, an astrologer, seeing that the person is from Manitoba, they might predict and say, why don't you go and hunt for some wetland bison and some deer? Because they're thinking, oh, Manitoba. I heard that the prairies are in Manitoba. So you're bound to find some flatlands where you can go and hunt some bison. Simply because the person lives in the area of Manitoba. That'd be like an astrologer predicting that if you have the sun, if you have Mars at 1 degree of Virgo, then it's going to be absolutely trash and it's going to have nothing going for it, right? When in reality, such a person might not get accurate results from that astrologer because they're missing the fact that Mars is also in the nakshatra of Magha. So this is turning out to be a long video, story of my life. The last point I want to make here, it's kind of a confusing one. I'm going to give it short thrift. I must note that the coordinates given for the nakshatra Magha here, it comes from Victicara's own research and is even debated amongst tropical Vedic astrologers like myself. This is because of what is called, it's the uncertainty of the exactness of the precession of the equinox. I won't get into that here. Again, I recommend you look up, Victicara's work is great, but also look up Ernst Wilhelm on the tropical sidereal debate on Google. There's a great article there for it. Just know that the nakshatras are like, again, with more of this metaphor, they're like these islands floating over thousands of years through the man-made boundaries called the 12 zodiac signs, a fact which is probably the hottest debated topic in the astrology world today. I recommend you digest it. The nakshatras are the stars themselves, sidereal. Earth's orientation, according to tropical astrology. Tropical astrology is really about the relationship of Earth to the sun and the relationship of that in our local sky to the stars. Earth's orientation is what causes these islands to drift. The nakshatras are like these islands drifting past these national boundaries from our perspective in their placement in the 12 sign zodiac. It's Earth's orientation is what causes the nakshatras to drift in the 12 signs. Every 2,000 years or so, like this is a 27,000 year cycle approximately, and which is interesting because it's about 27,000 years and there's 27 signs. About every 1,000 to 2,000 years or so, give or take, the nakshatras drift about 30 degrees forward and they come into the next rashi or sign. And eventually, after 27,000 years, like right now, again, Magha is at the ending of Leo and the starting of Virgo. In 20,000 years, that's going to happen again. It's going to be the same thing. So it's fun to think about that, there are special things happening with the alchemy of the sign, the rashis and the nakshatras this time around. That's only going to be, it's going to be special to this particular time in the cycle, in the 27,000 year cycle. We are the special ones in this 27,000 year cycle who get to experience the moon exalted in Taurus in the nakshatra of Parani. We are the ones who get to experience the power of the sun in Leo in the nakshatra of Magha. The nakshatra of Magha, the ancestral forebears of hidden generational energy, i.e. the Pitris, that's the deity of Magha. This nakshatra will express itself very differently in about 14,000 years, when Magha might be situated around Aquarius or Pisces. We can imagine then that Saturn being in Aquarius, where it's Mula Tricona, it's in its own sign, it's got much more strength than Aquarius. That Saturn in Magha will have a much better time dealing with this whole and this ancestral energy thing, even though it's still not its preferred bag of tricks. That so at that time it would actually be better for planets like Venus, which is exalted in Pisces. Once it's there, right? Once Magha in about 15,000 years drifts into the rashi of Pisces, then Venus could get exalted in that Pisces in the nakshatra of Magha, and that will produce the best results in the realm of the dead and the honor of family lineage. Personally, I'm just glad that my moon sign in the nakshatra of Jesta is in Sagittarius now, finally, unlike the last 2,000 years where the sign of Jesta, the nakshatra of Jesta, was debilitated in the sign of Scorpio. Jesta has gotten a bad rap in the last 2,000 years because it was debilitated in Scorpio. Now it's in Sagittarius. It's moving its way back up to exaltation. In about 14,000 years, I'll probably reincarnate. I'll be Jesta, and my moon this time then will be exalted in the sign of Taurus. These are the kind of things I like to think about. I don't know how you define, am I going to be Jesta again in the next life, but it's going to be in a different place? It's hard to say. Fun to think about. But as usual, it is very much speculation right now. But there are rivets of logic and rationale coming through the clearing, and we're in a very tasty time to be astrologers right now, folks. This is why I was excited to do this video for you guys today. And that was a long one. So I'm going to end it now. And after this, we're going to continue with our series. This is only the starting of our Nakshatra series, folks. And if you guys enjoyed this, there's lots more to come. For now, thank you so much for watching and being a part of my episode today. I'm Dustin Cormier for How to Rock Astrology. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you think in the comments. Blow up my comments section on this particular video. I'm very proud of this video. I think it's going to I can feel like it went really well. But let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments. And if you did like it, feel free to subscribe, because I always got more stuff like this coming through, folks. For now, I'm Dustin Cormier with How to Rock Astrology. Keep your eyes on the skies and proliferate, ladies and gentlemen. If you're a sidereal astrologer, let me hear your thoughts. Talk with your sidereal Vedic astrologer friends. Let's have the debate, and let's consider, as so many of us are in this thing going on right now, that we're all trying to get to the same clarity and truth that lies within ourselves. It'll be a lot easier to do that if we do it with, we'll stand up for ourselves. I've really laid out my opinion here. But, we should also still be respectful to those who hold different opinions than us. And I hope I did that. Let me know if I didn't. I'm always trying to figure this out. Anyway, I love you folks. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next episode in the series.